Hello, and welcome in once again to the most accurate podcast mankind has ever produced here at 4 for 4 Fantasy Football. I am Matt Okada. It is one day into week 8, which means we are more than halfway through the fantasy regular season and nearing the halfway mark towards fantasy championships. I'm here with John Paulson. John, how are you don't have to expose how many leagues you're in, but how are the leagues that you're in going halfway through the season so far?
Well, I'm not afraid to expose the number of leagues. I think it's 5 that I actively manage. I have to do waivers. That seems to be my upper limit to where I start to lose my mind after League 5. Some are going okay, good, and then some are kind of okay, bad, but none are a disaster. Well, one's a disaster. My league with Connor, we must just not. Like, this is the second year in a row where we've had a team near the bottom at this point in the season, and I don't know if it's just our decisions that we mutually come to end up being worse than either decision that we would do individually. I guess I don't know what's going on. I might try it again one more time with him next year, but I don't know. It seems to be a lost cause in that FFPC main event. But I also just like to welcome everybody to the Apocalypse. We have 6 teams on bye this weekend, and it's also the sports equinox on, I believe it's Sunday or Monday. It's the 27th, so it must be Monday. All 4 major leagues are in action on the same day. It's the only day of the year that happens.
You're not a Dodgers fan, are you?
Not really. I mean, I was rooting for the Brewers because I'm from Wisconsin. I go to Angels games here, but I'm happy to see the Dodgers. I'm in Orange County, not LA County, so it's hard to really jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah. All right. Well, that will be fun. But we will focus for now on one of those sports, which is the NFL. The 6 teams on bye, by the way: Cardinals, Jaguars, Raiders, Lions, Rams, Seahawks. So if you have any of those teams or you rely on any of those players, get them out of your lineup. You should have done that already. Briefly, Thursday Night Football. Maybe not so briefly, because there are some very interesting takeaways potentially here. The Chargers lambasted the Vikings 37-10. It was disastrous on both sides of the ball for Minnesota. But there's a couple things on the Chargers side worth noting. First of all, Kimani Vidal went back to being amazing. He had a really bad game in between his first game and this game. 23 carries for 117 yards, 5.1 per carry. He scored a rushing touchdown. He is a borderline must start while Omarion Hampton is out. An RB3, where do you rank him, do you think, for that stretch?
Yeah, I would say, on a neutral matchup right now, given his workload. I mean, he had 24 touches, and I looked it up. It's Vidal. I'm gonna try to do a better job of pronouncing names. I know it's deep in my career here of butchering people's names, but listening to Al Michaels say it, I guess, correctly, Vidal. I think at this point we have to learn his name and how to pronounce it, given the fact that he had 127 yards combined and a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, I think he's in that. I mean, you could probably, if he played the Bengals or somebody, you could probably see him approaching RB1 territory, just given this sort of workload that he's seeing. And he's got Nyheim Hines behind him right now. Jarrett Patterson ended up with 11 carries, actually ahead of Hines. So, there's not a lot of touch competition for him when the game's on the line. I mean, I think a lot of these carries came late for Patterson. So, yeah, he's looking good.
Yeah, and the Omarion Hampton situation's a little cloudy right now. So, obviously, Vidal. Oh, that's going to be hard for me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. He'll earn it. He has to earn it. He started earning it. Elsewhere, though, on the Chargers, Justin Herbert was incredible in a very tough matchup. Completed 18 of 25 passes for 227 and 3. Did throw a pick, but also ran the ball 7 times for 62 yards. His scrambling is starting to pick up, it feels like. So he was amazing. Looks like you can start him with some reliability. The big question there is the receiver trio, and now quartet, because early in the season it looked like Quentin Johnston had some kind of career resurgence. He had 0 targets in this game, Now, it was a weird game that they were leading by a lot for most of the game, but still, this was bad for anyone who had been starting Quentin Johnson with any confidence. Lad McConkey was great, 6 catches on 10 targets for 88 yards and a touchdown. And Keenan Allen was fine. He was involved for as long as they were throwing, and then they stopped throwing, basically. But the big news is Oronde Gadsden II. And if you look at his box score, you might think 5 for 77 and a touchdown on 5 targets. That's pretty good, but it doesn't even tell the full story of how good he was, because that was all in the first half. And then they did not have to use him again, and he looked amazing. So, the trio of wide receivers, how do you rank them rest of season? I think we just need to know, like, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, if you have the exact numbers, where do they fall for you, and what are people doing with them rest of season? And then I'd be curious to know the names you have above Oronde Gadsden rest of season.
Okay, I'm going to start with a story, and I'm going to be vulnerable here on the live stream. I'm in the Scott Fish Bowl, and tight ends get very high scoring in Scott Fish Bowl. And we were at our vacation rental closing it down for the winter. And I woke up early before the London game, and somebody had picked up and then subsequently dropped Tutu Atwell. And I had a Gadsden in my lineup. And I was thinking to myself, I don't know, Atwell has such a long history of doing well with Puka Nacua out. I'm gonna pick up Atwell. I'm gonna start him over Gadsden. And I did that, and it was the biggest backfire of my fantasy career. Atwell played 10 snaps and then I guess got hurt, re-injured his hamstring or something. He didn't play the rest of the game. It was a good spot for him against Jacksonville. Gadsden proceeds to score 50 points in this enhanced SFB scoring.
Oh, no.
So for the remainder of the weekend, I'm just hoping I can still pull out the win, and I was supposed to, according to the scoring. And I actually was going against my own projections because the scoring projections had Gadsden ahead of Atwell. That cost me 50 points. It cost me 4 spots in the standings.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not make the mistake of benching him again. I have him in there, and he had 33 last night for me. So
Yep.
just if you're out there listening and you've ever made a bad decision, know that it happens to everyone. And I even went against my projections. The moral of the story is don't get cute. Especially don't get cute maybe with an injured player coming back from injury. That's probably the best time not to get cute, especially with the scoring that was in Scott Fish Bowl. But anyway, I have him. I think he's pretty good. Which player, which receiver, I'm asking you, Matt, do you think ran the most routes last night?
I would guess McConkey just based off the production, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Quentin Johnson running wind sprints.
It was Oronde Gadsden at 31 routes run. Lad McConkey were close. He had 30. Quentin Johnston 28. Keenan Allen 17.
Wow.
So he has, they made Will Dissly, who I believe was healthy. He was a healthy scratch. So this is on. Like if you have Oronde Gadsden, you're in good shape. Playing with a good quarterback, they're obviously featuring him in the offense. He's got, I don't know, he had back-to-back 7-catch games, and then now he had 5 last night for the 77 touchdown, and it would have been more if the game had been more competitive. So he's definitely moving on up into the tight end 1 ranks rest of season, and he looks really sharp. As far as the receiver situation, I think we're probably back to where maybe we started the season. I think it's debatable. I think it is back to where we started the season because no one really had Quentin Johnston too high prior to the season. Once he blew up, then he started moving up. But it was McConkey, Keenan Allen, then maybe Trey Harris ahead of Keenan Allen, depending on some draft rankings. And then Quentin Johnston, we assumed, I think, as a community that he was going to get beat out by Trey Harris, and that just didn't happen. That all being said, I think we're back to Lad McConkey being the top target here. The cream is sort of rising to the top. Keenan Allen is still a very functional target earner. And then I think Quentin Johnston will sort of depend on, he's going to be out there for a lot of routes with Justin Herbert. So he's going to have some big games still. It's just, this might be it might be where we're going to start ranking him as a wide receiver 3 or 4, as opposed to him pushing into that wide receiver 2 or 1 territory like he was earlier in the season.
Kind of feels like he's into that Jameson Williams territory now, where there's a bunch of other mouths. He'll have some good games, but it's hard to know when they're coming. But yeah, Gadsden, I mean, McBride, Warren, Kraft, Ferguson, Kittle, Bowers. After that, are you putting anyone over Gadsden confidently rest of season? Laporta, Kincaid.
I need to pull up my rest of season rankings here.
Goddard's in there.
And then, they were done before this week. I mean, he's moving up. I mean, I think we're past the point where he's a blip. I mean, he was at tight end 15 heading into this week, and I think you're now getting him into top 7 or 8.
Okay. Yeah. So I got that Elite 6.
I mean, when you have this many games in a row, the 163 yards I think he had, or 164 yards he had the other last week, that was the 4th most of a rookie tight end in history.
Yeah.
And the most since 1985. Mark Bravo. What is his name from
Bavaro?
The Giants? Bavaro.
Yeah.
Was the last one to be a higher yardage as a rookie. Pretty incredible.
And again, like, the box score tells one story, but if you watch the game, he looks really good. Like, he looks like he could be one of the next elites. Like, we'll be drafting him alongside the McBrides and the Warrens in the near future. On the other side of the ball, there's not much to talk about. So we can more or less kind of just move on. Carson Wentz was hurt. He played almost the whole game hurt. Justin Jefferson was fine. Jordan Addison caught a touchdown. The running backs might be a bit of a disaster. I guess that's the one thing we'll touch on before we leave this game. How scared are you, or how concerned are you that the Minnesota running backs are just going to be a disaster rest of the season now that Aaron Jones is back? He made his return from IR in this game. Obviously, they could not get anything going on offense, so you figure they'll have a better running game in the future, but is it going to be split between these two guys and make both of them hard to start?
Jones ended up playing 26 snaps, running 19 routes. Mason played 17 snaps, ran 8 routes. Part of that was just because they couldn't run the ball. I mean, Jones had 5 for 15. Xavier Scott had 2 for 16. Jordan Mason 4 for 3.
That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty 11 for 34 on the night. Just could not run the ball and get it going. Yeah, once Jones was, I mean, I had Mason top 20 heading into the week, but once Jones was listed in, and you just start to peel away touches from Mason, who's not a big pass catcher, even when Jones was out. I mean, he might catch a couple. Just the floor is really low, as we see here. So he ended up dropping from about RB18 to RB22, I think, in half PPR. And then Jones kind of checking in the mid 30s, but neither guy met any sort of expectation last night, just given the lack of yardage. I mean, 130 yards passing for Wentz, or I'm sorry, 144 passing, 13 for Max Brosmer, 34 yards rushing. It's a miracle that Justin Jefferson delivered a decent PPR day. It's a miracle that Jordan Addison got the touchdown, because those are your two guys that you're, at least hoping to score in the passing game. TJ Hawkinson was disappointing. I had him at tight end 20. I was a little bit worried about his role with everything going on there. Yeah, I don't shed any tears for the Vikings.
Yeah, figured as much.
But yeah, this is from a fantasy standpoint, this has turned very quickly into a sad situation. I think they're going to probably ramp up JJ McCarthy and try to, infuse some life into this offense.
Yeah, TBD whether that works, because McCarthy was not great to start the year, but you figure after what we saw from Wentz last night, how hurt he was, and the fact that McCarthy was technically inactive but was the emergency third stringer tonight, he will be the guy starting next week, probably. That would be my distant projection. All right, let's get into some news. Before we do, as a reminder for the Q&A at the end of the show, so if you ask any questions, we will get to them at the end, but we won't get them to them live. Throw those in chats. If you've got start-sit questions between a couple of players, check John's rankings. That's the easy way to answer that. But if you have other questions, we'd be happy to answer them at the end of the show. Biggest news coming out of last week, and it's kind of been a running thing now for the Buccaneers and the wide receiver room. Mike Evans is out for what figures to be basically the whole year, certainly the whole fantasy year, with a collarbone injury that he suffered last week. This room is decimated. Chris Godwin is out this week, and he's been in and out and not granting much confidence for a long run of health at any point anytime soon. And Emeka Ibuka did come back and play last week somewhat shockingly and ran a bunch of routes and saw a bunch of targets. So it's looking like him. And I think the big question for now, John, is do you like anyone for this week? And then do you like anyone rest of season in Tampa Bay, given the fact that like this is an offense that works well when it's working? Baker Mayfield is great. So they're going to produce, you would think, who's going to get the production.
I mean, I think the game against Detroit was the first time that we really saw disappointing results from Baker Mayfield and the receivers. Like they weren't getting it. I mean, Tez Johnson had the touchdown. If I remember correctly, Mike Evans went out. He's shorthanded, Baker, but he seems to be able to compensate. I think right now in the short term with Godwin still on the shelf, Jalen McMillan still on the shelf. I don't know what his status is going to be. You're looking at Ibuka, Tez Johnson, who I think is moved ahead of Sterling Shepard on the depth chart in terms of fantasy value. And Sterling Shepard as the 3 with Cameron Johnson and Ryan Miller kind of rounding out the top 5. Remains to be seen if this is going to impact Baker negatively. I mean, I think if he has a Ibuka out there and Tez Johnson is doing what he has been doing the last few games, he's been pretty good. I think that Baker will be fine because he also adds some rushing yards. And then he's also getting production out of Cade Otton, who, when everybody is healthy, Cade is like gets a target or 2 targets a game. But we're in this situation, he starts to see pretty significant role, and he's already proven that he can deliver tight end 1 numbers when called upon. He's just not a primary target when there's 3 good receivers out there. I mean, if they had Evans, Ibuka, and Godwin out there, Cade Otton wouldn't be, he'd be a tight end 2 streamer. So given the current layout, I think he's more of a low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2. And there is enough here, I think, for Baker that you're going to continue starting him, especially in good matchups. You might start thinking about bad matchups depending on how he's doing. But I think for the most part, he's still in the QB1 territory.
Good luck to that wide receiver room. Please get healthy. All right. Elsewhere, Kendre Miller tore his ACL and is out for the year. Not the most necessarily notable name for fantasy, although he had been stashed as an attrition back in a lot of places and was starting to see some work. I think the big question here, or the fallout question, is, does this do anything for Alvin Kamara optimism in fantasy? He's been pretty much. Does this elevate him quite a bit for you rest of season?
It could. I mean, I think the question is how quickly will the coaching staff have confidence in Devin Neal and him overtaking or taking over the Kendre Miller role? He could step right into it potentially if they like him. If they are not confident in him, then you might see a big workload for Alvin Kamara. But he's no spring chicken. And I think the team understands that they need to have somebody take the load off. The other wild card here is Taysom Hill. I hate to say his name after the disappointing beginning to his season, but you could see him as well filling in as the RB2 if they don't think that Neal's ready. But it doesn't seem like Taysom Hill is rolling right now as a runner either. He does have a touchdown. His snaps have been very spotty. So those are the 2 guys I think that could, supplement Kamara. And I think for this week, Kamara gets a little bit of a bump because you're thinking, okay, his touches are going to be a little bit higher, his touch floor.
3.6 yards per carry and 4.9 yards per reception for Kamara this year. Those are both career lows. So it does seem like the age might be catching up to him, and it might not be that hard for someone to play their way into touches. We just have to see that to know. In San Francisco, the other Tampa Bay West, with these injuries, Ricky Pearsall is unlikely to play this weekend. Jawan Jennings should be there. He should be the wide receiver one. Last I saw, I think it is expected to be Mac Jones again as well. Brock Purdy's progression through this injury has been slow and methodical and not too well reported that I've seen, which is kind of par for the course with San Francisco sometimes. Assuming it's Mac Jones and assuming Ricky Pearsall is out, Jawan Jennings is how high for you? And what other fallout do you see, if any, for San Fran?
Yeah, I agree with you that Jennings is probably the wide receiver one. You look at last week's targets, I think he had 7. Kendrick Bourne only had 2. Kendrick Bourne, prior to that, in the 2 previous games, had 142 yards in each game. So and he has a really nice rapport with Mac Jones. So I don't know if that last week was a 1-week blip or if he's going to get back in the fold. The issue, I think, with this game is that Houston is number 1 in the league in wide receiver adjusted fantasy points allowed. So it's a bad matchup. I don't have a lot of confidence really in either player given what we know. Now, if Jennings comes out and gets 7 to 10 targets and Bourne again is in the 2 to 4 range or something like that, then I think we can move forward with confidence that they're trying to get Jennings wide receiver 1 type targets. And I loved him preseason, and then he held out, he got injured, and then now we're in this situation that we're in. So right now I have them both ranked as low end wide receiver 3s in a pretty short week. Like there's some other guys that I would rather roll out there because I just don't know, who really is the wide receiver 1 in this duo right now. And it could be either guy that leads this team in receiving.
You can also expect the tight end and the running back to be involved because they're very good at catching footballs. In New York, this is one of the weird situations of the year, maybe in recent years. The Jets have not yet named their starting quarterback for this week. As of an hour ago, I just double-checked an Ian Rappaport report. An Ian Rappa report. Aaron Glenn still has not announced who will be the starting quarterback. Obviously, Justin Fields has been quite bad, largely, to start this year. Tyrod Taylor was banged up, so he would be the guy that they would be considering to basically bench Fields for. If you saw any of the owner's comments, super weird. You do not see stuff like this often. He basically, not basically, he literally threw Justin Fields under the bus and said, if Justin Fields didn't suck, we'd be winning games. That is barely a paraphrasing of what he said. I mean, with Garrett Wilson out and Mason Taylor possibly not playing this week, I don't know. I'll ask you if you're starting anyone besides Breece Hall, but I don't really feel confident that Chill's giving a yes on any fronts. I think the question more is, if this move is made, is there any long-term fallout with Wilson and or Taylor, assuming Garrett Wilson doesn't get traded, which there are rumblings of?
You remember in a preseason when we were talking about Justin Fields and like you're projecting him and it was always the caveat that if he keeps the job, because he's one of these guys where with his rushing floor, he's in a somewhat competent passing game where he's getting like 180 yards passing with a touchdown plus his 60 or 70 yards rushing and possibly a touchdown. Now he's a QB1 all of a sudden. And, I had him ranked a little below that because he looked so bad in the preseason. And then they come out against the Steelers. I believe that was week 1, right? And it was like this shootout. So his stock's on the rise. And then and then it's just like the next week it's terrible. So it's like Jekyll or Hyde with him. And the lack of receiving weapons doesn't help anybody there. Like if Garrett Wilson is out, they don't have a real wide receiver 1. They have a bunch of like 3s. Wide receiver 3 types like Josh Reynolds and Allen Lazard. And, so it's a difficult situation. I think I wrote in sneaky starts that if Garrett Wilson were healthy, then Tyrod Taylor would be a sneaky start this week. Due to the matchup against Cincinnati, 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. But if Wilson's out, he's already been ruled out. I don't have confidence in Tyrod with this motley crew of receivers. I do think you can start Breece Hall. He should see dump offs. He should be able to run the ball. They're 32nd adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So I have him ranked as a low end RB1, high end RB2 this week because he's going to have to be the center of the offense. Now, it could be another unmitigated disaster where it looks like this Minnesota game from last night and the box score is just like super sad. Long term, we have seen Tyrod Taylor be competent. Long term, I think this would be a good move because he is a better pure passer than Justin Fields consistently. Long term, I think this would be a good thing for Garrett Wilson. So I think he is a bit of a buy low if you can trade for him. This week's obviously out. Tyrod Taylor has a knee injury. The QB3 is Brady Cook. I expect that Fields' confidence is perhaps at an all-time low. I don't know. He's getting kind of jerked around, but it hasn't done anything to earn the job, really. So it's just a bad situation for pretty much all parties involved. But I do think that it could come out the other end of this with a healthy Wilson and a healthy Tyrod for the back half of the season, and you could have something there.
I'm making a mental, possibly even physical note, a sticky note that I'm going to stick on my computer for the future. Whatever quarterback goes to New York, whenever, as a rookie, as a signing, I'm just going to be out because this place is a black hole of terror for quarterbacks. It's so bad. And this is like these kinds of comments from the owners, I think is part of why. This is not the fantasy stuff. This is a little on the side, but you can't say these things. Like, you want your quarterback to play badly? Talk about him being the reason that your team is bad and ruin his confidence even more. That's a great call. But moving on, getting back to the fantasy, we have a kind of oddly similar situation in Washington with a couple of good rushing quarterbacks, one of whom is out in Jaden Daniels. This one's by injury. And one of whom is in Marcus Mariota, who's kind of been serviceable at various times throughout his career, the veteran version. Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin are both probably back. They've both been practicing in full. So after not having Terry McLaurin for a long time, and after missing Deebo Samuel for a couple of weeks, it looks like this team will largely have their pieces back outside of Jaden Daniels, obviously. With Mariota at quarterback, do you feel okay about starting either of those wide receivers and anybody else in this offense this week in a tough matchup?
In general, Marcus Mariota has been really good since he's filled in and has been the backup in Washington. He had 20.3 fantasy points against Vegas. He had 16.2 against Atlanta, which is actually a pretty tough matchup now for quarterbacks. Last week he came in. Obviously, Jaden Daniels got knocked out of the game. He was 4 for 10 for 63 yards with a pick. He rushed twice for 34 yards. Of all the backups out there, he's like one that I feel like you can expect him to deliver pretty good passing numbers and pretty good fantasy numbers for the receivers there. So the issue I think here is that it's a pretty tough matchup against the Chiefs. They will likely be trailing given the way that Kansas City's playing. So that could lead to some game script production that maybe, wouldn't otherwise expect. But it is it's a tough situation to go in and play Kansas City on the road. So I would feel pretty good about Deebo. McLaurin, I'm long layoff, a little bit worried about him. I think they're both I think Deebo's probably a wide receiver 2 type. He's injured too. He's got the heel injury. And then McLaurin coming back we don't really know what he had. It's like a core groin issue. So it's kind of scary. He had the second opinions but it does look like he's back. So that's great. He hasn't done much this year. So I'm kind of ranking him as a wide receiver 3.
Okay, fair enough. In Chicago, Cole Kmet is missing practice and unlikely to play this weekend with a back injury. Obviously, nobody cares about Cole Kmet in fantasy unless you're playing in the 2 tight end league or maybe in the Scott Fish Bowl. Even there, probably not much. However, there were a lot of people who drafted Colston Loveland, the rookie, the highest drafted rookie tight end, by the way, for everyone who's been super excited about Tyler Warren. Does this open a window for a breakout? I'm not even necessarily asking, are you going to start Colston Loveland this week? Unless you are, and then he's a sneaky start, in which case I'd be curious. But do you think that this provides an opportunity for a Loveland breakout and we get another rookie tight end who's performing well?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have Cole Kmet, who's been basically standing in Loveland's way in terms of his snap share, and now if Kmet is out, Loveland could be a near every down player, 70-80% of the snaps, running most of the routes in an offense that we've seen put up some points in a what is kind of a sneaky shootout with Baltimore, who's really struggled on defense, and we might have Lamar Jackson back. I think Lamar's presence, I think, helps all the Bears offensive players, because now they're, it's not going to be a Bears blowout. So you might get into a shootout. This might, a rising tide lifts all boats type situation. Loveland, I don't have ranked super high. I have him at a tight end 22, but I think that's probably the highest I've had him since week 1. So I definitely think he's in the mix, in the streaming mix.
We could always use more tight ends in fantasy, so feel free to break out Colston Loveland. In Houston, Nico Collins is in the concussion protocol still, and it's not looking great that he's going to play this week. This is an injury he suffered last week during the game. Christian Kirk also likely to be out. If Nico doesn't go, which is looking like it's going to be the case, and Kirk also doesn't go, are you rolling a Texan out there? There's a few wide receivers on the fringes there that people might be interested in. It is the bipocalypse. Do any of these guys crack your sneaky starts, or are you willing to slip them in any lineups?
Yeah, I did write up. I wrote up Loveland as well. If you want to read it in sneaky starts, I think Jalen Noel is a sneaky start given what he did last week. It does seem like they want to ramp up his involvement, and I just want to remind folks that he was up there in Matt Harmon's reception perception charting in terms of success rate on his routes from college. I believe he was second in the sample that Harmon had in success rate. So right after Travis Hunter. So he's a good route runner. This might be a situation where, they're trying to force Jaden Higgins upon us, and it turns out that Noel is the perhaps better receiver. We'll see. Wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence in Higgins or Hutchinson, but in really, 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 really deep leagues, they're going to be out there running routes, so you could do worse. I think probably the big winner here besides Noel is Dalton Schultz. 98 yards, I think, last week, 10 targets or something. So when he's sort of the Cade Otton of Houston. So when these receivers are all down, like he's up. So he's a low end tight end one for me this week.
Yeah. I have officially moved Jalen Noel into my Scott Fish Bowl lineup over Marvin Mims. So good luck me. Last thing here before getting to, Lamar Jackson is a big question mark for this week. He has the hamstring injury. He's been trying to come back from it. We do not know yet if he will be. We haven't seen today, which is Friday's practice report. So keep your eye on that. Going into the weekend. If it's not Lamar Jackson, does that reduces your excitement about any pass catcher? Does it take anyone from a start to a bench? Let me ask it that way.
Well, I think you're probably still starting Zay Flowers. You're not starting really any other Ravens. Maybe Mark Andrews if you're in a pinch. Derrick Henry, I think you can still start. And then on the flip side, DJ Moore becomes less appealing, and Colston Loveland becomes less appealing because you just don't think that they're going to be having to throw maybe as much. But DeAndre Swift and Rome Odunze, I think, have earned every week starts. And I think even with less firepower on the Ravens side, if Lamar Jackson is out, then Caleb Williams is still, startable as a low end QB1, high end QB2.
And then last little bit of news here. Mike McDaniel, TBD how much we can trust anything he says or how long it will last. But he says he wants a more split backfield in Miami. less of a heavy workload for Devon Achane, which is a very fair thing to say based on Devon Achane's workload so far this year, because he has been absolutely incredibly overworked. 121 touches in 7 games. For the quick mathers out there, that's about 30 touches a game. So it's been wild. The guy that would theoretically involve there would be Ollie Gordon. Do you care? Do you think this is even viable for Miami? Is it just going to continue being Achane? And are you going to continue rolling him out there with zero concerns?
So I have 89 rushes and 32 receptions, 121 touches. So I don't know how you get into 30. It's 17.3 a game. So I don't know about our math.
Did I unmath?
I don't know. I was wondering. The reason I was bringing that up is because you mentioned the 30 touches per game. I don't think that's where he's at. He's got he was 16 last week.
Yeah, that's
20 in week 6, 16 in week 5. So I don't know why McDaniel would want to ratchet this down, because this seems about right for an RB1 in Miami. So I don't, but Mike McDaniel is having a rough year. I give him his mental state can't be very good right now, given what's going on there. But yeah, I mean, I think it would maybe be a reason to pick up Ollie Gordon just to stash him. But I do not think that this 17 touches a game for Achane is unsustainable at all. So, yeah, I don't know. I take this with a big grain of salt.
He has, McDaniel has had 2-back systems in the past, so maybe he just would prefer to have 2. And Achane is not the biggest, maybe most sturdy of running backs, you could argue. So there's that as well. But yeah, it's Achane is very near the very top, and also doesn't necessarily need as much volume as a typical fantasy running back. So also, like I said, it feels every week like Mike McDaniel is coaching his last game. Well, we'll see how long he lasts, but who knows what will happen moving forward. All right, let's get into the key matchups. We kind of hit on this one a bit, but Bears Ravens is the game of the week. That's largely assuming Lamar plays. It's a 50.5 point over under. I would expect that would drop if Lamar doesn't play. But even if he doesn't, the Bears defense has still not been good. And then the Ravens defense, obviously, unless they fixed everything over their bye, which they have done in previous seasons, they have been atrocious. 30th versus quarterbacks and running backs, 29th versus wide receivers. They're middling versus tight ends, but this feels like just because everyone else is scoring too many points for the tight ends to score that many. You kind of went through the list a little bit already with the Odunze, Caleb Williams. The one thing you didn't touch on, I'd be curious about, is the Chicago running backs. Because last week, obviously DeAndre Swift has had a bit of a breakout in recent weeks. Last week, he had 19 carries for 124 yards and a touchdown. Kyle Monangai had 13 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. He also had a couple catches. And we know Ben Johnson loves to have these 2-back systems. Would you be curious or interested in starting Monangai? Is DeAndre Swift a must start? And then anybody else on the fringe that we didn't talk about already?
Well, I think the Monangai volume, stemmed from the Bears being pretty much in control of that Saints game. The Saints did try to make a little bit of a run. So certainly from a matchup standpoint, you could make the case that this is a Monangai sneaky start option, because, the Ravens are 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. I think if Lamar plays, it's a much more competitive game that the Bears could be trailing. And if they are, I don't see him getting to 10, 15 carries or whatever that you would want from a sneaky start. So he would be one that if Jackson is out, Monangai probably gets a little bit of a boost, because we might, kind of be in garbage time early, or in, drain the clock time early. It's an interesting game. I definitely think Swift is a must start, given how he's come out of the bye. It looks like they've maybe fixed the running game over the bye, and is just looking a lot better than it did prior to the bye. So Swift's a must start, and I think Monangai he does fit the profile a bit as a sneaky start, but I worry that the touches won't be there if Lamar plays.
Last week, or not last week because they were on bye, but the last game they played, which was Rush and Huntley both playing, they scored only 3 points, and the Rams only had to score 17 points to win. But in the 4 of the 5 previous games, 40-41, 30-38, 20-37, 10 for the Ravens to 44 for their opponent. So unless, like I said, if they fix the defense, okay, we might be looking at something different down the rest of the stretch of the season. But if they did not, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for scoring. Ideally, Lamar is in there to keep the scoring up for everybody. On the Chicago side, or the Chicago defense side, they are bottom 10 versus quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. Also average against tight ends. So you're starting Lamar, and you said you're starting Derrick Henry. If Lamar is in, are you willing to start anybody else?
Well, Zay Flowers, for
Besides,
sure.
yeah, besides Zay
Yeah.
Flowers.
Mark Andrews, I think, is still viable as a low end a tight end 1, high end tight end 2 if Lamar is playing. This would, I think, be potentially a shootout, and he's likely to get a touchdown in that sort of a game if it's a 40-44 game or something like that. So he's not as confident as a start as he was earlier in his career, but it's not like Isaiah Likely is taking over or anything like that. So he's still out there leading the team in tight end routes, and if it's Lamar Jackson, then there's always the possibility of a multi-touchdown day for Andrews.
All right, that's the game of the week. The fate of the week is Browns Patriots. That's what I've got in here. The Patriots have been very good lately, but they're a little hard to predict in terms of who's going to score the points outside of Drake May. It's an over-under of 40.5. Obviously, the Browns defense is quite good. They are 5th against quarterbacks in AFPA, but I don't think we can realistically sit Drake May at this point. But they are also 1st against running backs and are solid against receivers and tight ends. With the Kayshon Boutte / Stephon Diggs / Demario Douglas situation, do you feel confident in any wide receiver? And then with the running back room, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson has been better for fantasy production in recent weeks, but can you start him against this defense? Anyone really outside of Drake May that you're starting with confidence for New England?
I mean, I think Diggs you could start. It's not mega confidence. It's wide receiver 2 type level. Ramondre Stevenson has sort of taken over the backfield. I don't know if this is going to last, but he is
Gross.
wildly out touching Travion Henderson. So I've got Ramondre as a low end RB1, even in a pretty bad matchup against Cleveland, just from a volume standpoint. And plus, he does catch some passes as well. Hunter Henry, I think, is a decent start. Cleveland is 10th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. So I've got him ranked, just given his workload all year. I've got him ranked as a low end tight end 1. Just not going to probably be a lot of points scored in this game because I don't think Cleveland can keep up. Cleveland's going to limit scoring for the Patriots, and then they can't score themselves really. So it's going to be probably a low scoring one. The over under of 40.5 kind of reflects that.
On the other side of the ball, the Patriots have been pretty tough against quarterbacks and tight ends. We don't care about the quarterback because it's Dylan Gabriel. But the tight end position, a lot of people have been, or forced to start Harold Fannin Jr., particularly this week during the Bipocalypse. So how confident do you feel in Harold Fannin Jr.? And then the Patriots have actually been kind of soft against running backs and receivers. Quinshon Judkins is a must start, but is there anyone else in Cleveland you're willing to throw out there?
Judkins for sure, high-end RB2 this week. Patriots 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. Fannin is like the only other person's springing to mind as startable. David Njoku, though, might be back with a knee brace on, and that might throw Fannin's snaps up in the air a little bit. I still think if Njoku is limited and he's wearing a brace and is probably not going to see his full complement of snaps, so he might just take over the tight end 2 role there, and leaving Fannin on the field on most downs and most passing downs. Then I think he's still startable as a low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2.
2 weeks ago, Jerry Jeudy saw 13 targets. I think it maybe convinced a lot of people to pick him back up, but he has done diddly squat for fantasy all year. He's a must drop pretty much for you.
I've got him ranked 43rd this week, and it's a short
Yeah.
week, right? We've got 6
Yeah.
teams on bye. I don't have any confidence in him. He does fit the profile of a sneaky start. He is in our breakout receiver model. We joke about it on the back end that we have to start redacting him because it's just like, when is this, like, the opportunity he's getting signifies a breakout is coming, but
Mm.
you can't really count on it. Nothing has happened. He's had this breakout profile for weeks now, and it's just not happening. I think at this week, if you have him and you're just like, okay, this is not a bad week to start him. He's probably going to see a lot of targets in a good matchup. Maybe maybe he goes for 70 yards and a touchdown. I mean, there's worse guys to start than somebody that's getting 7 to 10 targets a game. So throw the dart. Maybe it hits bullseye.
Yeah. 8 targets, 5-9, 5-13, 4, but still has not hit double digit fantasy points. So I understand the back end confusion and frustration with Jerry Jeudy. It's just not working well in that Cleveland Browns passing game, except for the short stuff to Harold Fannin. All right. We will get through the positional matchups of note and then get to the Q&A. At the quarterback position, Jordan Love gets the Steelers. They are 31st in AFPA. Jordan Love is a bit confusing because it feels like he's efficient and talented, but just rarely throws the ball enough to matter a ton for fantasy. But I'd be curious how high he gets for you in a very good matchup. And then whoever starts for the Falcons, and I say that because Michael Penix Jr. is dealing with an injury, he should be able to go, but if he doesn't, just keep an eye out. If you're in a bipocalypse situation, their backup quarterbacks, they're not too bad. That they're facing the Dolphins, who are 27th in AFPA. Any interest in either of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan Love is a sneaky start. He's been competent the last 2 weeks. 15 points against Cincy. He's not going to lose you a game. 13.5 against Arizona. You're hoping for more. He is running the ball. He's had at least 22 yards rushing in the last 3 games. He had 18 before that in the 4 games ago against Cleveland. So there's a little bit of a rushing floor there. He does have 2 games where he's scored at least 20 points this year against Washington and Dallas. He had 26 against Dallas. So this does sort of in his green, he's got 4 green matchups. This is his 4th green matchup. Against Washington, he had 20.9. Against Dallas, he had 26.3. Against Cincy, he had 15. And then now he's playing Pittsburgh, who's 31st in adjusted fantasy points, a lot of the quarterback position. There's going to be a lot of intensity in this game just because of the Aaron Rodgers playing against his old team. Matt LaFleur is going to want to prove that the Packers made the right decision on moving on from Aaron Rodgers. So they're going to want to give Jordan Love opportunities to throw the ball and look good. Jordan Love is going to want to show out and do well against his old mentor, whatever, teammate. I don't think there's a ton of ill will with Aaron Rodgers towards the Green Bay community, or I think there is a bit of a ill will against the franchise because he feels like they don't treat players the way they deserve to be treated on the way out the door. I mean, there's probably a nicer way to do some things that the Packers just tend to move on, and that's the end of it. So this is a primetime game. I would be surprised if the Packers just go run heavy and Jordan Love has a 13-point fantasy game. I think this, the Packer defense has not played well, particularly on the road. They've been good at home, but they've been giving up points on the road. And I think the Steelers offense is good enough to put up points. I know, Aaron Rodgers is probably going to throw a couple touchdowns. He's going to check out us some runs in the red zone so he can throw a touchdown or 2. I just think this is a sneaky shootout, and I think Jordan Love has an opportunity here to have a 2 or 3 touchdown game and surpass 220 points again.
I have been doing this podcast with you for about a year and a half now. That is without question the most narrative-y answer you have ever given, and I'm very here for it. Love that. By the way, Penix says that he feels good and should start. if he does QB2, mid-range QB2 for you
Yeah,
against Miami?
he's my QB 15. I wrote him up for sneaky starts. The matchup's great against Miami. You worry about this one being a 17-3 win, and Bijan has 2 touchdowns or something. But the matchup, and his performance has been pretty good the last few weeks. So I think he's startable.
All right, on the bad side, Daniel Jones gets the Titans. They're 7th in AFPA. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that teams don't throw against them very much, and they do run against them very much, which obviously Jonathan Taylor is more than capable of doing here. So it's not like they have necessarily a killer defense, but they're allowing, 7th fewest adjusted fantasy points to quarterbacks. And then Dak Prescott gets the Broncos. He's been amazing, but they have also been amazing, 3rd in AFPA. So that's a great against great. Curious how high you have him. And Jackson Dart gets the Eagles, who are 4th in AFPA, but he doesn't seem to really care about the opposing matchup so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are games, except for maybe Daniel Jones, who's just been he's one of the stories of the year in the NFL. He's just been really efficient, and I would continue to start him. I have him in Scott Fishbowl. I drafted Mayfield, Geno Smith, and Daniel Jones, and I've been starting Mayfield and Jones pretty regularly. And I would feel even against Tennessee, just given the low volume against Tennessee, I think he'll still be efficient enough to deliver. He's got Alec Pierce back. He looks like he's getting Josh Downs back. He's obviously got Tyler Warren and Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. So he's guiding this really efficient offense, and I think he'll produce. There is a chance of a 3-touchdown, 21-0 win or something from Jonathan Taylor, but typically, half the touchdowns come from passing, at least, depending on the team. But I think Dak Prescott he's been too productive to bench. I've got him I've got Jones at QB8. I've got Prescott at 10, and I've got Jackson Dart at 13. I think Jackson Dart fits into the category of, it's a tough matchup, but he's been productive, and the Eagles offense is starting to maybe catch fire, the passing offense a little bit. They're going to put up some points. The Giants are probably going to be either in a tight ball game or playing from behind. So they're going to need him to run and to throw and everything. So I feel pretty confident about him, especially in a short week.
Incidentally, he scored 23.6 fantasy points against this very team just a couple weeks ago. So has and then 29.42 against the Broncos, who I just mentioned are 3rd in AFPA. So this kid is wild, and this team is now wild. It's very fun to watch. For the running backs, the Panthers, the curious running back by committee here between Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. They get the Bills, who are 28th in AFPA. One of the surprisingly much softer matchups against running backs. And then I also am curious, given that it's a bipocalypse, I put some lower names in here that I'm curious if you're willing to throw into lineups. Tyler Algier, obviously a backup. They are facing the Dolphins, who are 27th in AFPA. And you talked about it being maybe a 17-3 situation. If that's the case and the Falcons are way up, maybe Algier gets some run. And then RJ Harvey against the Broncos, who are 29th in AFPA. How are you meeting out the Carolina backfield? And then are you interested in streaming either of those other guys?
Well, right now I'm still ranking Dowdle ahead of Chuba Hubbard.
That's my fault.
You've got Chubbard in the rundown. Chuba Hubbard, it was the touch count was 18-16 last week, but if you look at the yardage, Rico Dowdle rushed 17 times for 79 yards. Chuba Hubbard rushed 14 times for 31 yards. So I don't think that the coaching staff's going to look at this and then look at the previous 2 games with Dowdle just going ape shit, pardon my language, over against a couple teams, that they're going to say, okay, we need to scale back Rico Dowdle's workload. So I think, I thought it would be more like a 19-11 split. I remember tweeting that out last week, and it ended up being 18-16. They got some extra touches that, were ahead of projection. The Panthers have been surprisingly good this year. This could be a better game than maybe we think, especially if they're able to control the ball on the ground. You do have Andy Dalton in at quarterback, which, is not a huge downgrade from Bryce Young at this point. So I think Rico Dowdle's a low end RB2 in a short week. Hubbard is like an RB3. I would still expect Dowdle to lead this team in touches unless Hubbard gets off to like a really hot start. I think this might be a hot hand situation moving forward but I think at this point, Dowdle has earned the RB1 role right now.
Yeah.
To answer your question about Algier, I don't know if you want. Yeah,
Sure.
we talked about him on the podcast yesterday, the Sneaky Starts podcast. This shapes up to be an Algier game where he gets his 10 plus carries. And if he's getting it against Miami, you might end up with 50, 60 yards and a touchdown. I think this is a good spot for him. And you mentioned Harvey, and I really hadn't thought too much about him, but against Dallas, the amount of points that are likely to be scored, he does have a role in the passing game and does have a red zone role as a receiver in the passing game. He could pop up and score a touchdown.
Notably, Dave Canales has basically said that he likes having the two-back system and they don't plan to change that. Obviously, the split is the big question. And if they're looking at the production, you would imagine they would go for more towards Dowdle. But TBD. And they and that fan base really like Chuba Hubbard, who has been quite good for them, efficiency-wise and otherwise over the last couple of years. Also,
Hubbard got paid, so he's got a big contract. He's not going anywhere. So
yeah,
I think we're looking at a split. But maybe they just rotate series. But the Dowdle's been way more efficient this year.
Yes. I write a bold prediction for NFL.com every week, and I said that these two would go for 200 rushing yards against the Bills and make it a 3-point game. TBD who wins it. Because I agree with you. I think this team has been sneaky good, and this is the way to beat the Bills. On the bad side, Jaylen Warren gets the Packers. They are second in AFPA. He does tend to get involved in the receiving game a bit, so maybe that helps. And then Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt gets the Chiefs. They're sixth in AFPA, but also he has just not been good. And I don't know that have we talked about Bill Krosky-Merritt much, John, together. I'm not sure, but I have been poo-pooing the Bill hype all preseason and regular season because he is a 7th round draft pick, and those guys just don't do the RB1 thing as rookies all year long. And I feel like we're seeing that, but maybe you have other thoughts. So tell me how you feel about Jaylen Warren briefly, and then tell me how you feel about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in full and whether people should be trying to get off of him.
Well, I mean, if you look at his season as a whole, and if I just told you these stats, you probably would be like, oh, that's pretty good. 5.2 yards per carry.
That is good.
He's averaging 54 yards per game, 0.57 rushing touchdowns. Fantasy production's been a little, it's 9.6 half PPR on average. So I think what we have here is a bit of recency bias, just the last 2 weeks, especially because he had 2 really good matchups and wasted them. 17 for 61 against Chicago, which we were all excited about, to see him against Chicago. He's coming off of the 14 for a 111 2-touchdown game against the Chargers. The same Chargers who just blanked the Vikings.
Why do we play this game?
Plus, he had 2 catches for 39 yards in that game. I still think that he is the RB1 in Washington. I think this is a tough matchup against Kansas City. So he's, he was being ranked in those good matchups, being ranked as like a mid-range, high-end RB2. Now he's more of a low-end RB2, especially he's still hanging there because we're in a short week and we just have, 6 teams on bye. Like he's going to be at 22 just because he's seen 14, 17, and 13 carries in the last 3 weeks. So there's a possibility for a decent game here. I'm not after the, wasting the Chicago and Dallas matchups. I'm not super excited about it, but especially with Jaden Daniels out, because I think Daniels' presence opens up running lanes that aren't otherwise there. Although Mariota's, capable runner as well. I just don't think he's as dangerous as Jaden Daniels.
Definitely true. All right. To the wide receivers. On the good, Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, obviously, but Devontae Smith has been very good recently. He gets the Giants, who are 23rd in AFPA. The Packers group, I'm going to name a lot of names here, and then you can talk about what you care about, basically. The Packers
Okay.
whole group gets the Steelers, who are 30th in AFPA. The Broncos group gets the Cowboys, who are 32nd. We've talked about that. And then it's Bipocalypse, so I will mention the name. Alec Iomanner gets the Colts, who are 31st. And he has done a bit of the Jerry Jeudy, which, you know, the air yards are there. He should be scoring fantasy points, and for the most part, he just isn't. So, who are the must starts, if any, out of these groups? And are there any sneaky starts that you're willing to throw in as well?
Well, I don't really trust any of the Titans receivers. I mean, Chimere DK, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think he had the best game last week. Van Jefferson, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, whatever. Alec Aomanor started hot and has kind of disappeared. So I'm just sort of like staying away unless I absolutely have to start somebody that's going to be out on the field. Devonta Smith, I think I've got him at wide receiver 14. I've got AJ Brown at wide receiver 11. The passing game seems to be picking up. I don't know if that's going to continue because the Eagles have been a little bit, schizophrenic in terms of their offensive identity, but they threw the ball a lot last week against the Vikings. I wrote up both Matthew Golden and Romeo Dobbs against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's bad against receivers. You mentioned it, 30th adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. For the same reasons I like Jordan Love, I think you're going to have some opportunities for Golden maybe to get his first touchdown. Dobbs is always a red zone threat. Remember, he had the 3 touchdowns against Dallas when I'm sure almost nobody started him.
Yep.
But with Dontavian Wicks is injured. He's got a calf injury. He's recovering from a ankle injury as well. We might have Christian Watson back for a handful of snaps, but really it's going to be a lot of Dobbs and Golden, I think, out on the field with, 2 tight ends. Maybe you get some Malik Heath working in there, but I do think Dobbs and Golden are both sneaky starts. Cortland Sutton is a must start. He's in my top 10. And, Troy Franklin at 36, Mims at 44. Like, I think one of those two will do something. They might both. But I think at least one of those two is going to have a pretty good game. I don't know which one because Mims, his snaps have increased, and we know he can make some plays when he gets the ball in his hands. He's not as good of a route runner. Franklin started hot, has been kind of quiet lately, but still running a lot of routes. I think, did he have a touchdown last week? So I don't know. So I think he seems like he did. I've got him at 36. I've got Mims at 44.
I feels like the right move there is to play 2 DFS lineups where you have Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin, and then Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and Marvin Mims. And then one of them will work. But yeah, it's to figure out which. And I just benched Marvin Mims for, who did I bench him for? Noel. Yeah. Okay. On the bad side, the Giants wide receivers get the Eagles. This is mainly a Wan'Dale Robinson question because he's been the only one that has been realistically startable with any consistency. And we talked about Jackson Dart and the fact that he's kind of produced regardless. They're 8th in AFP against wideouts. And then the Bills wide receivers are facing the Panthers, who are 7th in AFPA. But more importantly, it seems like it's very hard to figure out whether there's anybody consistently startable for Buffalo, which feels odd with Josh Allen at quarterback. But like Khalil Shakir seems to have a low ceiling, and then no one else seems to have a floor. So is there anybody that you're willing to roll out from that crew, and also now in a tough matchup?
Yeah, I'm willing to start Shakir and Wan'Dale Robinson, but just note that they both have bad matchups with their slot corners.
Okay.
Cooper DeJean or Cooper DeJean has been the best coverage corner for the Eagles on a fantasy point per route basis, and Khalil Shakir has Chow Smith Wade, who's been the best Carolina cover corner on a fantasy point per route. But Shakir has been the best receiver in Buffalo for the last season and a half. So I've got a relative amount of confidence in him. The best matchup for the Bills is Keon Coleman. He's got kind of a neutral matchup against Michael Jackson. So take that for what you will.
How far is what you will? Because Keon Coleman has not done diddly squat for us all year.
He might pop his head up. That's when
Okay.
I cover myself by saying he might pop his head up for a
Yes.
big game.
Very fair. All right. Last thing here, the tight ends on National Tight End Day, baby. So you know there's going to be some tight end scoring. The good matchups here, Dallas Goedert gets the Vikings. Oh, wait, no, he doesn't get the Vikings. They just played. Who does Dallas Goedert get?
The Giants.
Thank you. I had the wrong thing written here. The Cleveland tight ends get the Dolphins. We kind of hit on that. And Mason Taylor, if healthy, gets the Panthers. They are dead last in AFPA against tight ends. In a bipocalypse, you're starting Dallas Goedert without question. We hit on the Browns. So the real question here is, if Mason Taylor plays, are you forcing him into a lineup?
I'm not forcing him into a lineup at this point. I know he's dinged up as well. I think he was limited yesterday, so I'm interested to see his health. But I mean, if Garrett Wilson is out and we do have Tyrod Taylor in, I think he can play Mason Taylor with a reasonable amount of confidence that he's going to see 6-7 targets. I mean, I think he would have to. So Goddard, I think, is a solid tight end one. He's been pretty good this season, although last week 3 for 18 on 3 targets with both of the Philly receivers going off. But prior to that, 9 for 110 and a touchdown, 3 for 19 and a touchdown, 4 for 37 and 2 touchdowns, 1 for 33 and a touchdown, seeing 11, 9, 4, and 2 targets respectively in those games. We were sort of seeing like a larger, but I think after that Giants game when he saw 11 targets, and again, they're playing the Giants, so it might be the same game plan, like use Dallas Goedert. Mm-hmm. We were feeling pretty good about his role because at that point he'd seen 7, 2, 4, 9, and 11 targets. And then last week against Minnesota in what was a high scoring game with Jalen Hurts playing or throwing the ball a lot more than usual, he only gets 3 for 18 on three targets while playing 49 out of the 50 snaps. So, but given the tight end landscape, and it's going to be National Tight End Day, it's probably a good idea to have him out there because especially given what he did against the Giants last time around.
You have a son that might be in this age range. Do you know about the 6'7" meme?
Yes.
Okay, because you just said it. Did you do that on purpose?
Did I didn't. Yes. I didn't on purpose. Sometimes I've been throwing it in on purpose, but I haven't. That wasn't
okay. I think you said someone was going to have 6-7 targets, and I almost fainted. I don't understand what it means, but I know it exists. On the bad side, you can call this the bad. Well, the bad part about this, it's George Kittle against the Texans. They are 5th in AFPA. He also, last week, had 2 targets and 0 fantasy points. It was the first time ever in his career that he did not catch a pass. But he is the king, the mascot of National Tight Ends Day. So I'm curious how much the narrative plays in here and how confident you are in Kittle moving forward despite that. And then Zach Ertz gets the Chiefs. They're 4th, and he's been very fringy, kind of like the Goddard situation where he was scoring touchdowns, but with fewer targets. How do you feel about those guys?
Yeah, I think with Ertz, with Deebo Samuel back and Terry McLaurin back, he kind of falls into tight end 2 territory. If those guys were out, he might be the primary target this week. But they both look like they're going to be in. He could, surprise with a 5 for 50 day if they get into garbage time and they're just giving all the underneath stuff. And he is a red zone target for Washington. I think he's startable, but I'm not super excited about it or optimistic. Kittle, I mean, I think his return and not catching a pass is alarming. You're hoping it's a blip, but they ran the ball really well, and Houston is tough to throw on. I do think that Kittle is going to be a perennial tight end 1 just because of how he played last year. It probably would help him if Brock Purdy came back. Just thinking about Mac Jones, how he does seem to like Kendrick Bourne, and he did target Jawan Jennings 7 times last week, but they just got the running game going really well last week. And the way I think Houston, because they're 19th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, is probably going to be a lot of handoffs to McCaffrey, and if they are rolling, they may not go away from it. So I do think Kittle in this current landscape is a tight end 1. You start him based on his historical production, not on what he did last week, but there is a bit of concern here because Houston is 5th, as you mentioned, against the tight end position.
Also, for what it's worth, the 49ers getting good in the run game is heavily incumbent upon George Kittle's return. He is unbelievable for that run game. And I think you can expect Christian McCaffrey to be very good on the ground with him in the lineup. All the on-off field George Kittle numbers from Next Gen Stats look unbelievable for Christian McCaffrey. So big for him. All right. That was a lot. Let's get into some Q&A. We have several questions from Miss Takem. Mistakem? Not sure. Isaiah Davis or Jaden Blue lotto ticket rest of season. This is Jets or Cowboys backup running back.
Because you have a weird situation here because Miles Sanders, I believe, is not done for the year. Braylon Allen, like we've got Braylon Allen and Miles Sanders just off looming.
Mm-hmm.
I probably would go with Blue just from a better offense standpoint.
Okay. I like the better offense answer. I wonder if I would go Isaiah Davis. Just when you're playing with these guys, you're playing for the lottery, for something weird to happen and hit. They're one of the most rumblers in the trade conversations, trade deadline conversations, is Breece Hall. If he were to get moved, which means you don't have to wait on an injury, Isaiah Davis theoretically would be a starting running back for a while. So it feels like your chances of hitting are a little higher, even though if you hit with both of these, Jaden Blue probably hits much better. So I guess there's two ways to look at it there. Chance of happening or how good they can be if they hit. And those are two different answers for which choice to make. Jeffrey Gross says, what are your thoughts on trading Devontae Adams and Chase Brown for Amon-Ra St. Brown? That feels like it depends heavily on how much you believe in Chase Brown rest of season. So that's actually an interesting question for you, John.
I mean, he did show some signs of life last week. Maybe the Joe Flacco injection at quarterback or, change at quarterback is going to make this rushing offense a little bit better. It's been really brutal all year, but showed signs of life. I think, St. Brown is the best player in the trade, obviously, in a 2-for-1 like this. Adams, other than last week, has been a little, and his touchdown, his yardage has been down. Puka is the clear wide receiver 1 there. I don't mind this trade if you can take the hit at running back.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it depends on if Chase Brown is your RB4 versus if he's your RB2 or 3. If he's your 2 or 3 and you don't have a good 4, I don't think you can make this because you got to have starting running backs in fantasy. But if you can take the hit, I agree with John completely. This is a wonderful trade to upgrade from Adams to St. Brown. Samuel Burke says, being that I've had a horrible year and I'm 1-6 and I need points now, is overpaying for Vidal worth it? Vidal, being I have Hampton on IR, sending someone like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, or in a follow-up chat, Jalen Warren for Kamani Vidal.
If you need to win now, you got to do something. Yeah, I think I probably would. I don't know. Would you rather keep Warren or JCM?
Well, I am a noted JCM hater, so for me, I would rather keep Warren. The tough part about this is Vidal just played, so I need to win now is difficult with the fact that he just scored all those points on your opponent's team or another team. But I think I would make the move with JCM. The way I see it there is because you have Hampton, I see Vidal as better than JCM until Hampton returns, and then Hampton is better than JCM. So basically, in my opinion, you have a better starting running back all year, theoretically. Is that crazy?
I mean, it's not crazy. It makes sense to try to make a move here to try to, get to 3-6 and then get Hampton back. But you're already in I don't know how you're going to do this week. You might be 1-7, and
yeah,
it's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, while this makes sense, if you really need to win now, you might need to go find another running back to trade for because Vidal scored his points somewhere else already, fortunately. In 10 Sidopi 76 says, should I trade Stephon Diggs and Rico Dowdle for Ashton Genty? Ooh, this is an interesting one.
I think it's Intense Dopey 76.
Intense Dopey. Big. Thank you, John.
I had extra time to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is yeah, probably. This is kind of similar to the Chase Brown trade, because if you can take the hit at receiver with Diggs, you are, I believe, getting an upgrade at running back. Rest of season schedule for Genty looks pretty good. Better than Dowdle's. I think you know, Dowdle's running so well that that's actually not. It's an upgrade. I don't know if it's a huge upgrade from Dowdle to Genty at this point, just because I think Dowdle probably will keep like a 17 touch floor, and that might be enough. I mean, on the season, he's outscored Genty, I believe. So I don't know.
Yeah,
how do you
he's
feel
outscored
about
a lot of guys through those 2 games. This depends so much on whether you believe Genty is going to get better, and I don't know that I think he is. Like, that team is so bad. And you just said, like, Dowdle's gonna have a 17 touch floor. We would hope or expect. Genty's gonna have a higher touch floor than that, maybe like 8 more touches, up to 25 a game, maybe even more. But if he's, 60% of the efficiency, 70% of the efficiency, which sounds crazy, but it's pretty much been what it's been, then you're not even getting a big boost here and you're losing Diggs. So, and, in the off chance that Chuba Hubbard gets banged up at all, Rico Dowdle is by far and away better than we would expect than Genty, just based off what we've seen so far. Although, obviously, he was not drafted to be that base. Genty was a top 5 running back pick in a lot of places. I don't think I'd do it, but it's definitely close. It just feels so risky buying into Genty.
I will say that we've got Genty on bye this week, and then he's got, coming out of the bye, he's got Jacksonville, who are 9th against running backs. Then he's got Denver and Dallas, 24th and 29th. Then he's got Cleveland, which is number 1. But then he's got down the stretch, he's got Chargers 22nd, Denver again 24th, Philly 25th, Houston 19th, and Giants 26th. So Genty could have a pretty good run down the stretch. I think it really sort of depends on what you think Dowdle's role is rest of season, and whether or not you could take a hit at receiver by losing Diggs.
I would be curious to look at, this is something we probably can't do this quickly, but something to look at before you make the trade. I would be curious to look at the Raiders lines in the games for the rest of the year, because a lot of those games that are soft matchups for running backs efficiency wise, if the other team's scoring a ton of points, it feels like Genty's not good in those games where the Raiders are getting blown out. Like, he just starts to get benched for Raheem Mostert or whatever. But if the Raiders can hang in games, then I think he has a much better chance of being good. Like in the Bears game where they only lost 24-25, that was his massive 32.5 point blowout. In the Titans game, they were within 10 points. He scored 15.6 fantasy points. So they're not going to hang in many games, but if they can hang in some, I think those are the games Genty's better. This is a very close one. I don't think it's wrong to go either way. Jay Hang 2055 says, hi, would you trade Dak and Rome Odunze for Lamar and Breece Hall in half PPR? This feels like a positional thing. If you have a bunch of good wide receivers and not any good running backs, and you're swapping Odunze for Breece Hall, that doesn't feel terrible. And Dak for Lamar doesn't feel like as bad of a swap as most people would think, because Dak's been incredible. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Dak is the number 3 quarterback right now. He's averaging 21 fantasy points per game. Lamar Jackson is averaging 23.3, but obviously he's a lot lower in the standings because he's missed games. Yeah, I mean, I think if you were looking to upgrade your running back situation and you can take the hit with Rome Odunze, then this is fine. But you are trading for a player right now, Lamar Jackson, who we don't know is going to play this week. So I might wait until we know that you have a starting quarterback for this week. But if you are not necessarily trying to upgrade your running back, like I think Dak and Lamar have pretty similar value right at this moment because Lamar is dinged up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the right take on the quarterback's room. And if you want to make the positional change, then this is a way to do it. Last question, unless something pops into the chat. George C97 also thoughts. Well, this was a follow-up to a start sit question. Go check out the rankings for the start sit question, George. But on the trade question, thoughts on trading Bill, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, for Kenneth Walker, who is a very curious fantasy conundrum. I would be curious to know your overall temperature on Kenneth Walker, who he gets the touches, he gets all kinds of touches, but so does Zach Charbonnet, and Charbonnet seems to steal every single possible touchdown. It is so frustrating. Walker has decreased in fantasy points in 5 straight weeks after a game Charbonnet missed, I do believe. So Krosky-Merritt, I'm not a fan of, for Kenneth Walker, given the split.
I lean JCM on this because his role is more defined than Kenneth Walker. I mean, Kenneth Walker is ahead of him, 71 to 67 and a half PPR scoring this year. But it's pretty sad when you look at 11.5 in week 4, then he had 9.1 in week 5, 4.2 in week 6, 6.6 in week 7. He's not getting the touchdowns where at least you would think JCM, if they get into the red zone, is going to get the touchdowns. And he at least has a 26-point game here within the last 3 weeks. I think that scoring and year-to-date stuff is close enough that, especially considering JCM didn't start the season as the starter. Really, I mean, Eckler was there, eating up some touches. I lean Ja'Cory on this one.
Yeah, even with how much I dislike Krosky-Merritt, I think I agree here, because you need touchdowns in fantasy to be great, especially when you're not super involved in the receiving game, which Kenneth Walker is not. He has not had more than 1 catch in a game since week 1, and he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3 because Charbonnet just steals them all. So I think I think he's more explosive, although Krosky-Merritt's also quite explosive, by the way. But he's just not getting the enough volume, and particularly enough volume where it counts in the red zone, where Zach Charbonnet, this Seahawks team is just obsessed with bringing in Zach Charbonnet when they get inside the 15 or 10-yard line. So I just think the upside's super capped on Kenneth Walker, unfortunately.
If you look at rest of season, strength of schedule is the next thing I want to look at. Washington, 22.3 for hotspots PPR for running backs, and Seattle's is 19.4. So the schedule favors the Commanders and JCM as well.
That includes a championship game against the Cowboys, who are 5th. Allowed the 5th most points of running backs. That's pretty nice. All righty. We will end the show there. Tons of great stuff. Holy Bipocalypse. It's going to be tough. Good luck to everybody. Good luck to you, John. Where can people find the stuff that matters to make their final decisions heading into Sunday?
Well, Sneaky Starts is a good place to start for the Bipocalypse, because there's definitely some good ideas in there. I'm going to try to update that on Saturday, because it is a big week for buys and people might need a few extra starts once we know some more of these injuries and who's going to be out, who's going to be in. So, check back there if you want. Always check the rankings. Keep that updated through Sunday morning. 4for4.com.
Sweet. Tons of goodies there. All right. We will sign off. Hope we see you all surviving the Bipocalypse and back here in week 9. Adios.